Well, the screens decided to start flickering just before services. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but maybe we'll press through and it'll heal itself. Maybe. We'll see. Thankful for your presence here. We are studying from the Gospel of Matthew, the 17th chapter, and the chapter begins with Jesus and Peter, James, and John going up the mount. I'm not positive which one, but we call it the Mount of Transfiguration. And on that mountain, as they're up there, Moses and Elijah revealed to Jesus and the disciples, and Jesus carries on a conversation with them, but he is glorified or has this glory radiating from him that recalls Moses on the mountain with God on Mount Sinai. And we talked about that a little bit. Jesus as the Moses-type prophet that was prophesied to come. And Jesus, Matthew, as he's writing, he's demonstrating that this Christ, this Jesus, is that prophet, that he is the fulfillment of this prophecy. And like that, Moses came down the mountain. Israel was in disarray. He had been gone a while, and things kind of got out of hand, and they created an idol. Jesus is going to come down the mountain. Things are going to be in somewhat of a disarray, not quite to that extent, but even yet it still recalls Moses on the mountain. Well, let's take a look at the text here. We'll start reading at verse 14. This is as they come down the mountain, Peter, James, John, and Jesus. When they came to the crowd, a man came up to him, kneeling before him, said, "Lord, have mercy on my son, for he has seizures, and he suffers terribly. For often he falls into the fire, and often into the water, and I brought him to your disciples, and they could not heal him." Jesus answered, "O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me." And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the boy was healed instantly. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, "Why could we not cast it out?" He said to them, "Because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it'll move, and nothing will be impossible for you." And when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him. Now look at there, I just wrap back around to verse 14. All right, so here we have Jesus, Peter, James, and John come down the mountain. There's a situation. There's a crowd gathered. His disciples, minus the big three there, have been ministering to the crowd. And there's one that they could not fix. All right, there's a situation. A man with a son, he's possessed. In the beginning, let's just go ahead and take it as it comes. He has seizures. It says he has seizures and he suffers terribly. He falls in the fire, falls in water. And so right now, upon our first reading, we may believe that he's got a medical issue, right? Seizures. He's got something going on in his brain, short-circuiting, and is causing seizures. Matthew, in his gospel, differentiates. Oftentimes, this is a question that comes up when you're reading the gospels. Oftentimes we see a passage like this. Someone has a terrible physical reaction, seizures, and then you see it later called demon possession, and you think, okay, medical issues are those, or what we see today as medical issues back then, did they call those demon possessions? But Matthew differentiates between the two. Now on your page of notes, I don't know, I did. It's on the screen here. It's also on the notes if you got a page of notes from the back. Matthew tells them apart a bit. His fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought him all sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, those having seizures, and paralytics, and he healed them. So he does make a differentiation between the two. So if we try to consider all the physical issues, or when we see someone possessed by a demon and try to claim that it's strictly a physical thing that Jesus is doing, Matthew sees them as different. It's not a one-to-one thing here. Back in the first century, they had a little bit different view on that and the way they believed demon possession to work. And oftentimes it was understood that when a demon did possess someone, their goal was ultimately to destroy that person. And so when we read in this text that he is thrown into the fire and into the water, we would read it in the first century context as this is a demon trying to kill his host. And that would be the normal understanding here in the first century. So we have a situation here. It's pretty terrible. And the Father has brought the Son to Jesus' disciples, and they are unable to do anything about it. It's not for like a trying. They tried, but they couldn't cast it out. That's where things get interesting. So, as the man brings his son to Jesus, that's what fathers do, right? A child's in trouble, you go to great lengths. You'll do whatever you have to. Your followers, your disciples couldn't do it. Now I'm going as high up the ladder as I have to go to try to get my son healed. Now Jesus remarks here. They seem harsh, right? Oh, faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to bear with you? And remember, he's talking about his disciples and their inability, right, to cast out a demon. And it's pretty stiff, especially compared to his response to his disciple when they go aside here in just a moment and have a conversation. But again, he'd point back to Moses coming down the mountain. The reaction of Moses is harsh, throwing down the tablets of stone. It's a good recall. It's an echo of Moses. It's a good demonstration of that. Jesus heals the boy. The demon comes out. Everything's great. That's kind of what we expect. Then the disciples, probably out of embarrassment, maybe they after hearing Jesus rebuke, they feel like, oh, we should have been able to do that, but we weren't able to do that. Let's go aside over here and talk about it a little bit. See what the failure was. And that's exactly what they do. Why could we not cast it out? And so the response is because of their little faith. Little faith. If you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, and now we study about this. If you've been in Bible classes for long, the mustard seed being one of the very smallest of seeds that you'll find of a plant growing in a garden. And it's not just a comparison between a mustard seed and a mountain. Both of these phrases are idioms. They carry extra meaning along with them. This is the grain of mustard seed is used all the time in the language to convey a point. Sometimes even in hyperbole. Man, that thing is tiny right there. That little old fish, about like a grain of mustard. That's how they would use it. Use it idiomatically. Try to convey a point, the tiny nature of it. And that's what Jesus is doing here, right? The small nature, the immature nature, the minuscule faith that you have, right? That's why you couldn't do it. But then he runs to the other end of the spectrum when he refers to the mountain being moved by a small amount of faith. Now the mountain, in Jewish history and Jewish tradition, we can go back to the foundations of the earth. Now back to the Old Testament. Think about the way the earth is described. You got heavens and the heavens above heavens. And you have the earth and you have the pillars of the earth. Under the pillars of the earth is the foundations of the earth. I had a diagram. I guess I could have used. I've shown it to you multiple times. But mountains are a structure that the ancients believed, ancient Jews and others as well, believed that as much mountain as sticking up out of the earth, it also had a root that was buried into the earth. So it wasn't just the mountain that you could see, it was the mountain that was also underneath that held it in place. And so to move the mountain, this kind of language, and again, an idiom, it was something that was viewed as, or a phrase that was used idiomatically. It was a phrase to demonstrate the near impossibility of anything happening. So it'd be used that way in common language. We go out and go fishing. Tammy says she's going to catch more fish than me. I'm going to say, hey, you might as well go try to move that mountain over there. Try to use the same language. It's a near impossibility, right? He's shaking her head because she said, I moved that mountain a bunch of times. But it was normal use. Both of these idioms that Jesus is using here, it was not something uncommon in everyday language. You could hear it in everyday conversation. It wasn't something bizarre. If you'd have had something this tiny, even, you could have done something this great. Why could you not cast out the demon? Well, I'm going to argue that your faith was insufficient. You just didn't have enough faith to do it. You have the power, you have the authority, but what you lacked was the faith. And so his encouragement, nothing will be impossible for you. Now again, we're talking idiomatically. It doesn't mean to be able to do anything and everything they want to do, but that's the way Jesus is speaking. Now I included a verse here from Zechariah just because it seemed appropriate, because inferred in faith, the very nature of faith itself means the reliance on another. And in the case of the faith of a Christian, our reliance is on Christ and his power. And so go to the Old Testament, right? It's one of my favorite things to do. Learning to rely on God and his ability to perform what he has promised, to accomplish his will among the Israelites. You get to Zechariah rebuilding the temple in face of all sorts of adversaries. You get here to chapter 4, verse 6 and 7. Another one of those very powerful verses. And again, one of those you'd find probably wood burned into a plaque hanging over a kitchen sink or in a den or something. He said to me, this is the word of the God to Zerubbabel, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. Who are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel you shall become a plain, and he shall bring forward the top stone amid shouts of grace to it. So it's not by might, not by power, but by my spirit. It's through the power of God that these things are accomplished. And that is part of our definition of faith, the reliance on the power of God to accomplish. And so casting out a demon, having faith that God can do these things is the same faith or the same power that'll take a mountain and turn it into a plain, or take a mountain and cast it into the sea. So very, very, very powerful, informative situation there. All right, moving into the next small section here. Here in chapter 17, starting in verse 22, as they were gathering in Galilee, Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and he will be raised on the third day. And they were greatly distressed. Now this is sort of part of the messianic secret, but Jesus has revealed to them multiple times now that this has to happen. And it seems as we're getting closer and closer to Jesus turning his eyes towards Jerusalem, to the travel narrative where he begins leaving Galilee, heading towards Jerusalem for the last time, that these warnings, as we read them, it seems like they're falling on deaf ears. Peter has tried to rebuke Jesus at least once, but since it's just kind of it's almost a passing thing, right? But he's going to be delivered into the hands of men. They'll kill him, be raised on the third day. And this bit of information is going to come in handy on about that third day as they're sitting around and begin contemplating what they've witnessed around an empty tomb. They were in the region of Galilee. Now they're up north end of the Sea of Galilee in Capernaum. Verse 24, they came to Capernaum. The collectors of the 2 drachma tax went up to Peter and said, does your teacher not pay the tax? He said, yes. And when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, what do you think, Simon? From whom do kings of the earth take toll or tax? From their sons or from others? And when he said, from others, Jesus said to him, then the sons are free. However, not to give offense to them, go to the sea and cast a hook. Take the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth, you'll find a shekel. Take that, give it to them, for me and for yourself. Okay, really interesting passage, right? This is the paying taxes passage. A little bit more going on than just paying taxes. But first, the 2 drachma tax. The 2 drachma tax you paid because you're Jewish. You Jewish, you're going to pay tax. That's just part of your existence in the Roman Empire. After AD 70, and I think I put this in your notes. Yep. It was also used as a penalty for the revolt against Rome that sparked, well, the destruction of Jerusalem. But there was a tax beforehand as well that they paid. It helped with some of the favor that they were, I say helped, but it was sort of Rome's way of getting something out of the Jewish people, since they did not require them to worship the emperor. They did not require the Jews to worship. They understood them to be an ancient faith, and they did not require them to worship the emperor or any of their other deities, because they understood Israel to be monotheistic and very devout. So instead, they left them alone, kind of backed away from them, let them rule themselves for the most part with some oversight, but they did charge a tax. And so that's what's happening here. This is the tax, the 2 drachma tax. It's coming around, being collected. And so they want to know, does your teacher, your master, pay the tax? And the answer is he's supposed to. What are we going to do about it if he doesn't? And so we have the response, which is the really interesting thing. Before Peter goes in and asks him for the 2 drachma that we're going to need, 4 if he's going to cover Peter as well, Jesus is anticipating, right? What do you think? He poses a question. What do you think, Simon? Whom do kings of the earth take toll or tax? From their sons or from others? All right, are they taking this tax from their own family, or are they taking it from everybody else? They're getting it from everybody else. And Peter says, from others, right? And that's the right answer.